everyone, I'm Nikki Haverstock and I'm a self-published cozy mystery author, and this is the author to portion of my YouTube channel. I've been having a tough week, I'm having a tough day, and I decided to reward myself by doing something I'm really passionate about, which is talking about writing and publishing. So I am here today with, what do I have, 1, 2, 3, 5 nonfiction books that'll help you write that are not craft books. So I'm not talking about plotting books or, any way to actually get your writing to be better, but to get you to be better so that you can write. And this is the area that I am most interested in. And I'm going to probably start kind of with some more esoteric books and move more towards books that are directly related to writers. I love nonfiction books, and I prefer books that are based on science. And so my favorite kind of books are the kinds that dig into studies and tell you the science and all that, as opposed to books that are more of like, hey, I'm a great guy and this is how I did it. And I'm less interested in that unless you're someone like Tina Fey or Amy Poehler or Mindy Kaling or Steve Martin. So apparently I have some exceptions. But in general, some of these books that I'm recommending are a little dense or academic. And I would encourage you to read all of them, but I would also say feel free to read a little and then think on it and see how you can incorporate it. So the first book on my list is Deep Work by Cal Newport. I'm going to put all of the links down in the description. They are affiliate links. You pay the same price as always, but I get a little bit of money back, theoretically. Deep Work talks about the idea of uninterrupted big blocks of time, allowing your brain to do work that is better and more ingenious and more creative than if you broke up that time. The idea being that the sum is more than the parts, and so if you get 3 hours of uninterrupted time, you're going to do better work than you would if you had 30 minutes. And I don't necessarily mean like the Pomodoro technique. It's more of the idea is if you work and then spend 5 minutes doing email and then work and someone interrupts you and all that. The idea if you just have these blocks of time. It explores a lot of things that are considered normal within our culture, like constantly checking your email, constantly checking your Facebook. It talks about what you see in elite like musicians, how you have this limited prime brain time, and so how you can do it. One of the things that I liked is they go through all the science, and then they do spend a significant portion toward the end of the book talking about ways that you can implement this, because not everyone. They look at a lot of examples through history where people might go away for a month from their work and just push out a book or a theory of psychology or something like that. But realistically, most of us can't do it. So they do Cal does spend a significant amount of time talking about other ways to do this, ways that are more, whether it's and it's also changed a lot of little things for me. Like I do a lot more blocking, which means spending, instead of being like, oh, I'm gonna do this for 5 minutes a day, just getting it out of the way, taking a whole day, talking about that when I'm on a roll, I'm just going to keep on a roll, and then on days when I'm struggling to write, that's when I spend more time with the family, whatever. So that's the first one, Deep Work. The next, there's actually 2 books. I haven't finished the second one, so I'm going to mention it, but because I just started it and I'm really liking it, but I'm not done with it yet. But they're tied together. The Power of Habit is the first book, and Atomic Habits is the second. So The Power of Habit uses a ton of case studies, a ton of scientific work. And they do everything from Alcoholics Anonymous to a fire in the London Underground, from individual examples of someone who had brain injuries and compare it with past brain injuries, but it talks about the science of habits, how they work, the fact that you have a trigger, an action, and a reward. I've actually lost both my husband and I have lost about 10 to 15 pounds since reading this book, because he talks about keystone habits and a study they did on weight loss. And we took what we learned in that and implemented it, and did find that it was able to change some of our habits about how we eat, and we finally got back into a nice groove. So what I really like about it is it's a really great example to study cycles in your life, things that you tend to do, things that you tend to say to yourself. In my case, I tend to sit down to write and have these loops that I go through. So I really like it for that. So it presents a ton of science, and it's a little bit more up to you in applying it. And then I just started Atomic Habits, which is much more based on his personal experience, which I don't mind as much because it seems to be a lot about application. And it's, I don't normally read books that start off with someone telling me their life story, because I kind of feel like if you can't prove it to me with science, I don't want to know about it. But that's a very narrow point of view for me. But he has some really great points, and he's very humble about it, unlike some books I've read. So I am just getting into that. I'm barely into it, but I do recommend it, that if you like The Power of Habit, consider Atomic Habits. These are books that I've made my husband read right after me. Okay, so now we're moving more into our writing specific, creative specific books. Those first 2 or 3, depending on how you count it, books are just really meant to be general nonfiction. Here's how your body and your mind work. Now we're moving into books that are specific to writing. So the first one I'm going to do is a really well-known book, which is called The Artist's Way. If you didn't know this, is kind of thing, she was married to Martin Scorsese. I never knew that. But this is sort of a philosophy. I think this is particularly useful if you are religious or spiritual or believe in a higher being, because she references a lot, but you don't need to be. I actually have done... I've listened to the audiobook several times. I like to do that. It's a very short audiobook, and I have not done all. I actually started it. A friend really suggested that I start doing the exercises, and I started doing the exercises right as quarantine happened, so I haven't been able to do them, because a lot of them are things like artist date, like you and your notebook go to an event, and it's just so that you and your brain can like go on a date and spend time in this creative endeavor. And I have a lot of friends that are artists in different mediums. And when I have a really good friend, and when we get together, which is rare because she lives in a different state, we go to museums and we just walk around and discuss it. What do you like? What don't you like? And because she's a visual artist, she helped me a lot to see what it was I like and ask me questions, and it's helped me open like an eyeball I didn't know I have in terms of how I view art and all that. Anyway, one of the things that she always tells her students when they say, where do you get ideas? And she's like, you just need to be present. And when they come upon you, you need to spend time with them. And so that's kind of what the artist date is. I have been doing, not every single day, but I've been doing the morning pages. I think this is a really nice way to cultivate and take stock of the part of your brain that you use for writing, and to value it, and to, it actually ties in a little bit with Atomic Habits. Right now I'm reading, listening to, and they were talking about how you view yourself affects your habits and your behaviors, because if you view yourself as a smoker who's trying to quit, that's different than saying I am no longer a smoker, I am not a smoker, and how that does, and if you write, then you're a writer, imposter syndrome and all that. So I do recommend The Artist's Way. It can feel, for me, I've felt sometimes it seems a little indulgent and a little woo-woo, but I discovered, you know what, a little woo-woo is good. Let me claim that. The next book is Art and Fear. Art and Fear is like my favorite book. I listened to it for the first time about a year ago. I know because it popped up in my Facebook memories, and I listened to it I think 3 times that month, and I was just getting it out to listen to again. It talks about a lot of the emotions related to art making, how we feel about ourselves. It has a ton of great analogies. If you have ever heard the analogy about the pottery teacher who broke the class in half, and half of the class was graded on the one perfect vessel, and the other half of the class was graded on the amount of work they produced, and at the end, all of the best work was from the group who produced a lot of work. The idea being that the best way to get better is to do a lot of work, which is something that I really relate to, because anyway, that analogy is from that book. I've heard that analogy a number of times. I've loved it. I always felt like I can't make myself a better writer than I am right now. I've never had the ability to read over my own work and elevate it. What I have is what I have. I've written it to the best of my ability. I can use editors who point stuff out, but until I just can't move better. But what I do well is every time I start a new story, I'm bringing in a new skill. My skill's a little elevated. It's kind of like going to the gym. Every day I go to the gym. If you push as hard as you can, there's no additional amount of pushing that makes me stronger that day. But as long as I keep coming back, I am getting stronger over a slow period of time. That's how I feel about my ability. So all of this information in Fear and Art, I love it. I recommend it all the time. No one ever believes me when I say it's a great book. It talks about how it's the most normal thing. It plateaus, the most normal thing in the world. Failures are where you find your greatest successes. You have to constantly be moving forward, and that, you know, it's not a straight line. It is these ups and downs and long plateaus and breakthroughs and all of that. And it's just, I love it. So if you listen to me and you can't, and you don't believe me, then I guess there's nothing I can say. I would say this is sort of like a half suggestion. I personally thought it was okay. I wasn't incredibly moved, but there's also The War of Art. A lot of people do recommend that. I call those three, like those three trilogies. What I found is that if I recommend those three, one of those three will be they will resonate with you. It'll be like ringing a bell, and that is the note that you vibrate on. Personally, for me, Fear and Art was it. It was perfect. And then The Artist's Way, and then The War of Art. And I know a lot of people who hate The War of Art, but there's people who swear this is it. This is what is the best. So I recommend those three together because it just seems to be that if my first two suggestions are duds for you, the third one will work. Okay, so the last recommendation, well, pseudo last recommendation, that is Dear Writer, Are You in Burnout? This is part of a 3-book series. I've mentioned it before, by Becca Syme. She's a channel here on YouTube that I highly recommend. And she's a 3-book series. They're called Dear Writer. Dear Writer, You're Doing It Wrong. Dear Writer, Are You in Burnout? And Dear Writer, Do You Have Writer's Block, or something like that. I always forget the third one. But Dear Writer, Are You in Burnout is the one that I suggest the most because it sets this idea of refilling the well. What is it for? Why is it more than just something pretentious that people say when they want to goof off? That's my kind of like reaction to it. And it talks about what burnout is, how to prevent it, how to recover from it. And I think that I recommend this to people all the time. You're a doctor, you're a parent, like you need to read this book because while I do believe that the creative process uses up more resources, you know, there's no denying that parenting, when I'm at home with the baby, I call him the baby, he's a toddler, full time, it uses up resources and you need to refill them. Now my writing, for me, takes up all of my resources. I am constantly refilling that well with a bucket just to be able to write. You can call me lazy, it's just what it is, okay? So I think this is an excellent, excellent book. This is the most writer specific, but it's good for any creative person to understand and to prevent burnout. And it is such a huge problem. I can't even tell you, a friend and I've been published it's coming up on 5 years that I've been published. I've just passed my 6-year anniversary of writing. And when I started, I was part of a wonderful forum called Romance Divas, and there was a chat room, and there was a ton of peers at the time, people who were in the same part of the process. A huge percent of those people are gone. They either worked a whole bunch and burned out, they pushed too hard, they couldn't maintain it, they couldn't keep the emotional, it's an emotional roller coaster. A ton of those people are gone. Some of them just decided this was not for them, which is, there's no failure in changing course as you learn stuff, but a lot of people, it was for them and they just burned out because they believe the hustle culture that you just push, and that resting is for the weak, and I can rest when I die, and the muse and refilling your well is just excuses, all that. So I said that was my last recommendation. That's my last direct book recommendation, but I do have a couple more that are just kind of like, I'm not going to go into great detail, but Malcolm Gladwell is someone that I enjoy. Sometimes he presents like he'll use one study to prove a point. That's not very well, that's not a great way to go. If you have ever heard the 10,000 hours thing, that is from him. I believe it's from his first book, which I believe is A Tipping Point. In grad school, we studied Blink. I think it's back there somewhere. To talk about the idea of just instantly knowing something even before you really have evidence. And so he's someone I recommend kind of looking up, but I don't have a strong enough recommendation for that book to put it. But I will put all of the links to all of the books down on my down in my description. And if you have other books that you recommend, I would love to hear them. So please put them in the description, and remember to like and subscribe and comment. Thank you.